Since 2007 to the end of 2009, we went through one of the greatest recessions that our country's ever experienced, things that even our parents, in some cases, did not have to adjust to. It resulted in tremendous layoffs in the private sector, and within the public sector, hundreds and thousands of employees were let go, ranging from police officers to educators, to those working in the healthcare industry, to those working with children. Hospitals were closed, healthcare centers were closed. At the same time, we saw industries change in terms of how they approach things, whether it be from the largest of General Motors to the smallest in the community, such as a bakery that would not be able to continue to do what they do. Prior to the Great Recession, the definition of unemployment was at 4%, which was acceptable. Today, unemployment is at 9.6%, and we're not going to go backwards. That is now the new norm going into the future. The paradigm of skills that are necessary to run government, to run the private sector is changing. General Motors of today that just did an IPO is a different General Motors of 10 years ago. And governments of today will be very different than governments of the future. My belief is that within that, our objective is not to lay off government employees. Our objective is not to just automatically and categorically, without concern, to cut services to the communities of which we live. The borrowing that we did in conjunction with the legislature was very targeted. It recognized that in our community, with each payday that happens, with each services that we provide, over $8 million reverberates right back into our community with each payroll, with each government contract, with each private sector development that takes place, which recognizes grocery stores, to gasoline stations, to daycare centers, to schools in the private sector and the parochials that have to stay open and require and look at those resources to stay open. So even as we change, the basics of government will still be the same. Public safety with police and fire, healthcare, and our ability to provide 2 hospitals, 2 health centers, 2 qualified health centers, a cardiac center and a cancer center. Education will still be something that we have to provide irrespective of the changes we make. The number of daycare and development centers that we have, the whole notion that we have to change how we approach early childhood education. 39 public institutions within our public school system. A university, a career technical program that was changed back in 2009 to be more conducive to the private sector, and a workforce investment board that is trying to parallel the opportunities in the private sector to the sort of trainings that we have to do. But in addition to that, we have a responsibility for affordable home ownership and to provide rentals to people so they feel comfortable and have an opportunity to move ahead. And a community is always judged more than anything else by how it takes care of those that can't help themselves. So for us, mental health and homelessness have been areas that has been very important that we continue to find the resources for. So public safety, healthcare, education, homes, and looking at those who need our help are things that we have nothing more that we have to pay attention to. And if you look in our community, when you talk about effectiveness and efficiency, you initially have to acknowledge that there is a level of redundancy that we can't get away from. We're 2 districts with 3 islands of activity. We need the 2 hospitals. We need the multiple institutions. We need the services that are provided on St. John the same way we need the services that are provided on St. Croix and on St. Thomas. That causes for a redundancy that many communities don't have. That does not mean, however, that we can't provide those services in a much more streamlined way, in a way that's more interactive, in a way that would cost us less, do more, and look at employees in a lot different ways in terms of their performance. And the way you look at it, the way you do it is to be innovative. And many communities have begun to do that. They've looked at outsourcing, downsizing, right-sizing, public-private partnerships as a way to open it up to the private sector, yet at the same time provide the resources. Some have gone for tax increases. We've not done that yet. Some have gone for expenditure cuts or allotment cuts. Those we have done. So the bridge and the gap that you look for is how do you continue to provide those services at the same time? In fiscal year 2011, state governments are projected to have a $125 billion deficit. In fiscal year 2012, that number is expected to grow because in fiscal year 2012, the recovery funds of stimulus will drop off and the cliff effect will take hold, which means at that point we have to figure out what do we do to replace those revenues or to eliminate those services. And it's not something that just the states grapple with or that we grapple with or other territories grapple with. Within our region, we're well known that one of our closest neighbors has laid off a tremendous amount of employees, over 20,000. Further north in the Caribbean, the UK government had to take over another government because of the fact that it couldn't fulfill its responsibilities. Further south within the Caribbean, another government is only surviving because the IMF is stepping in. And one other government is surviving because they've increased their VAT, their value-added tax, by over 25%. So the whole notion of survivability and how governments respond and what governments do become extremely important to the community and how we approach it. For our purposes, we've been able to set a foundation for whichever course we determine to be the best course, a course that will be determined in conjunction with the legislature and the executive branch, and then selling it to the community. We have set the platform with increased cruise ships to both our districts. We have additional airlift that is coming in across the board. We've been able to get our resort projects permitted. Now the whole notion of getting them to be into the construction phase is the challenge that we have. But at the same time that we've done that, we also have to look and determine the effectiveness and the efficiency of government by things that we have to look forward to based on the federal level. Healthcare reform is going to take over and be a tremendous burden and opportunity for all governments. For us, it allows us to capture people within our healthcare system that we've never captured before because the possibilities of opening it up become much more possible. Going from 7,500 people that we service today through Medicaid, possibly growing to over 20,000 by the time healthcare reform is done in 2011, opens up a tremendous industry for us. With the success of the applications that we've put in, and we're the only destination, the only municipality to get success on 4 applications, the whole notion of broadband investment opens up opportunities not just for those that are in business today, but for our young people who are concerned and look at the opportunities of information technology. The energy initiative that we have with respect to the LEAC and the cost to us on a daily basis, but reducing our dependence on fossil fuel by 2025 by 60%, offers us additional opportunities working with the utility company, working with the energy office to see where those resources then go. And when we talk about airlift, hotel development, and cruise ship activity, we don't look at it from the standpoint of what those industries or those companies are providing it. We look at it from the standpoint of the small business development that we can have in our community, from the taxi drivers to the vendors to the onshore activities that'll take place. But we have to, at the same time, push the private sector. They've got to begin to look at themselves differently, the same way we look at ourselves differently. The success of the Virgin Islands came in 1960 with the closing of Cuba, and the opportunities for us to become a tremendous tourist destination. I'm sure all of you have read in the newspapers how Cuba is now reopening, where Cuba had the most tourists that they've ever had within the last 10 years, and the amount of foreign investment, primarily Canadian and UK, that is going into Cuba will clearly open their doors again. At the same time, the Caribbean is much more competitive. Islands that never had major hotels now have branded hotels. Airlines that never went to those locations now go to those locations. So we're no longer the only game in town, even though we are the better game in town. And like us, they're all looking at financial services and information technology to take them to that new level, which requires them to look to their future, look for employment. So when we begin to look at our effectiveness and our efficiency, we have to define who we are. The general fund supports 9,236 employees of this government. We have 24 executive branch departments that's part of the cabinet report to the office of the governor report to me. We have 16 autonomous and semi-autonomous agencies with boards that themselves are outside with the general government, but clearly impact within the general government. We have a 15-member legislature and a 2-court system. And when you look at pure general fund revenues to pure general fund expenditures, and you look at nothing else coming in, we each year for the last couple years have had a $200 million gap that we have to figure out how to fill on an annual basis.